A group of 5 friends commemorates their camping trip with a cheerful selfie. But their fun adventure soon takes a turn as they find themselves lost in the woods. They stumble upon a desolate village, rumored to be home to a faceless spirit. One of them corrects the local legend, mentioning a different kind of creature entirely. A strange, almost comical drawing of a fleshy, blob-like monster. The others laugh it off, dismissing the story as a silly local tale. But the quiet girl in the back isn't laughing. She senses something is wrong. Her gaze falls upon strange, unsettling figures standing among the trees. More and more of them appear, a silent, watchful audience in the forest. And then, a heavy, fleshy foot makes a sickening sound as it steps onto the path. The sight ahead draws a mix of shock and morbid curiosity from the group. They've found a clearing filled with small, serene statues of children. But the quiet girl points out the obvious: none of the heads seem to belong to their bodies. As if on cue, a pale, dripping arm reaches out from the darkness between the trees. One of the girls, however, is completely unfazed, mockingly placing her boot on a statue's head. Her friend pleads with her to stop, but she just grins back at him. A swift kick sends the stone head tumbling through the air, crashing onto the leaf-littered ground below. From the deeper woods, a sickening, squelching sound echoes through the trees. And as the boy gently picks up the desecrated head, the forest holds its breath. That same squelching sound echoes again, much closer this time. The boy tries to mend the damage, gently setting the stone head back in its place. But his friend only grows angrier, scolding him for taking the legend seriously. In a flash of brutal retribution, her head is suddenly gone. Her friends can only watch, their faces frozen in pure, unadulterated terror. The fleshy monster from the drawing has made its appearance. And just as quickly as it came, the creature retreats back into the woods. The story then shifts to a different time, with a bus driving along a mountain pass. Inside, another group of 5 girls celebrates the start of their own camping adventure. Sitting nearby is a man named Ohara, a streamer who explores abandoned places. A final haunting image of the previous tragedy flashes through the narrative. Back on the bus, Ohara expresses his doubts about their destination. His coordinator, a man named Misaka, insists that his information is solid. But Ohara isn't convinced, knowing the man's sources are far from reliable. He glances at the map, confirming the location of the abandoned village. Desperate, he's willing to do anything to film a viral video and pay off his debts. A voice suddenly calls out his real name, Takeyuki. It's his girlfriend, Yukina, who playfully asks if his ghost hunt is legitimate. He brushes off her boredom, reminding her they have to ride this wave of popularity. She smirks, teasing him about the money he owes, earning a sharp rebuke. Yukina's playful mood sours as she brings up another point. Her attention shifts to another member of their crew, questioning her presence. We're introduced to Anako, a self-proclaimed psychic with a stoic expression. Yukina continues her complaint, worried that Ohara's growing fame will expose them. But their cameraman and special effects guy Kosai reassures them with a confident smile. He boasts about his perfect plan, though Yukina warns him not to overdo it. Looking out the window, Yukina suddenly feels a strange sense of nostalgia. Their survival expert, a former mercenary named Iri Moriguchi, scoffs at the idea of camping here. Yukina retorts that the local wildlife is far more dangerous than any soldier. Ohara pulls Kosai aside, panicking about why he invited the mercenary on what was supposed to be a casual trip. Kosai insists that this time they can't afford to fail, planning to put on a big show. Just then their bus grinds to a sudden halt. Their driver, a man named Miyama, announces that they've arrived. The crew steps out, finding themselves at the edge of a dense, unwelcoming forest. They've reached their destination, Alka Village, a name that carries an ominous meaning. Before them lies a grim, swampy landscape, matching the village's dark reputation. But as they get their bearings, a critical problem becomes apparent. Ohara stares at his phone, his expression souring with frustration. With no signal, their plan for a live broadcast is already falling apart. They are truly cut off, alone with the decaying remains of the abandoned village. Ohara turns his head, his attention caught by something just off the path. He recognizes the eerie statues from the viral video that brought them here. Yukina scoffs at the local legends, finding the whole curse story absurd. But a sudden, faint sound makes her freeze in place. A tiny, whimpering puppy sits alone amongst the fallen leaves. Kosei approaches it with disgust, trying to shoo the small animal away. Yukina immediately calls him out, her voice sharp with anger. She kneels down, gently coaxing the frightened puppy toward her. As the small creature takes a hesitant step forward, she reaches out a hand. She then glares at Ohara, demanding he start filming, knowing a rescue video will go viral. Ohara reluctantly agrees, pulling out his phone to start recording. With the camera rolling, Inako begins her performance, explaining the village's dark history. She speaks of a legendary creature, a fleshy, shapeless yokai known as the Napepo. The psychic adds that consuming its flesh is said to grant immortality. And according to her, this very creature still haunts the grounds of Alka village. Ohara, however, remains deeply skeptical, convinced such a monster can't be real. He decides the spooky introduction is enough, ready to move on to the main event. After all, the pressure of his 3 million yen debt weighs heavily on his mind. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a small, happy yelp from behind him. The puppy, now feeling safe, stands on its hind legs to greet Yukina's outstretched hand. Kosei, however, just smirks, a devious plan already forming in his mind. The scene then shifts to a lone house under a dark, foreboding sky. Back in the present, the puppy wags its tail, completely oblivious to the tension. But Yukina immediately shuts down the idea of taking it with them, calling the animal dirty. The bus door slams shut, leaving the small creature behind on the cold ground. Suddenly, the narrative flashes to a violent struggle, a figure in a gas mask being restrained. And standing over them is Yukina, her expression cold as she utters a single chilling command. The story then cuts to the crew planning their next move, discussing Kosei's staged disappearance. Ohara lays out the scenario where Kosei vanishes, only to be found later with no memory of the events. Their scheme also involves Inako faking a possession, a performance meant to fool everyone. Ohara falls silent, lost in thought for a moment. But Kosei breaks the silence with a chilling suggestion to get rid of the puppy. The others stare back at him, completely stunned by the idea. He lays out a twisted plan to fake the puppy's demise to prove the village is haunted. The views and controversy, he argues, would be massive and easily bypass any content restrictions. Ohara, however, is hesitant, questioning how they could possibly pull it off without getting caught. Kosei suggests using their special effects blood to stage the scene convincingly. Iri then offers a more gruesome method, suggesting they use wire to make it look more realistic. Another member of their group offers Kosei a drink, seemingly unfazed by the dark conversation. Outside, the abandoned house sits under the dark sky as a faint sound echoes from nearby. Kosei calls out to the puppy, luring it closer with a piece of bread. He and Iri corner the small animal, the mercenary holding a thin wire. Before the puppy can react, the wire is slipped around its neck. The two men work together to restrain the struggling creature. Iri explains his capture method, but Kosei impatiently tells him to finish the job. In its panic, the puppy bites down hard on Kosei's arm. Enraged, Kosei violently throws the small animal aside. His arm is left with deep bite marks, revealing a strange tattoo underneath. He stares at the wound, his face a mixture of pain and shock. Meanwhile, Iri calmly lifts the captured puppy, its fate now sealed. The small animal cries out in pain as it's flung through the air. It hurtles directly toward the clearing of statues, knocking a stone head clean off its pedestal. The impact is sickening, a collision of fragile life and cold, unyielding stone. Kosei's eyes widen in sudden realization. He understands immediately that he's made a terrible mistake. On the ground, the puppy's life fades away. Kosei panics, unsure of what to do while Iri looks on. But his panic quickly turns into a twisted idea. They'll use this tragedy to stage their monster attack. Iri emerges from a nearby shed, holding a tool perfectly suited for their grim task. Its sharp, rusted teeth promise a gruesome scene. Kosei brings the rusted tool down with brutal force. The small animal's final moments are captured in a silent scream. As this happens, something begins to stir in the murky swamp. A grotesque maw opens, lined with countless teeth. A strange, mournful sound echoes across the desolate village. The story then cuts back to the bus, where someone begins to stir. Yukina wakes from her nap with a long, tired yawn. She sits up, tying her hair back with a newly serious expression. A sudden noise from outside the bus catches her attention. Stepping out, she calls into the woods, wondering where the puppy has gone. She steps out into the eerie silence of the abandoned village. A sudden piercing scream shatters the quiet. The sound sends Ohara tumbling backward in shock. But his streamer instincts kick in as he grabs his camera rig. Recognizing Yukina's voice, he rushes outside, sensing an opportunity. He finds her frozen at the entrance to a dilapidated building. Her terrified expression is exactly the kind of raw footage he was hoping for. He zooms in on her face, capturing her genuine fear for the camera. The phone then pans over to reveal the source of her horror. But as he sees the scene for himself, his own expression turns to disbelief. Lying on the floor of the dilapidated building is a mangled, severed head. The rest of the crew stares in utter disbelief, questioning if what they're seeing is real. A closer look reveals the head is covered in writhing larvae, a sign of its decay. Kosai, with a nervous expression, cautiously steps toward the gruesome discovery. He brings his foot down with brutal force, testing its authenticity in the most direct way possible. The head caves under the pressure, its grotesque features twisting in a final, silent grimace. Kosai stumbles back, clearly unnerved by the act, as Ohara shields his eyes in disgust. All their doubts are erased, they now know this is no prop. But Ohara's horror quickly turns to manic excitement, as he realizes this is exactly the footage he needs. He grins wildly into his camera, ecstatic that he's finally found something undeniably, terrifyingly real. The others, however, are still frozen in a state of utter shock. Kosai snaps, grabbing Ohara and telling him this is no time for a livestream. Yukina, finally breaking from her terror, realizes they need to call for help. She quickly tries to dial the emergency number on her phone. But just as they feared, there's no signal anywhere in the village. Irie turns to their bus driver Miyama with a desperate command. He orders the driver to take the bus back to where they had reception and call the police. Miyama looks relieved, seeing this as his one chance to escape. He immediately bolts, shouting that they should all flee this cursed place. But as he runs, the rest of the crew just watches with contempt, mocking his cowardice. Kosai berates the fleeing driver, calling him useless for running away. As he disappears, Miyama screams a final curse back at the crew. Kosai lunges forward to give chase, but the others hold him back. Suddenly, Ohara gives a chilling order: do not call the police. The rest of the group turns to him, completely baffled by his command. Ohara stares at the severed head, a horrifying realization dawning on him. He recognizes her as the girl from the viral video, the one who kicked the statue. The others can only stare, their minds struggling to process the connection. Yukina's face drains of color as she realizes the original video wasn't a hoax. The crew erupts into a panic, arguing about what to do now that they know the danger is real. But Kosai's fear quickly twists into a manic grin, seeing this as a golden opportunity. He insists that if they can film the creature responsible, the video will go viral. The others stare back in disbelief, questioning his sanity in the face of such danger. Inako, meanwhile, can't even bear to look at the gruesome scene any longer. Her composure finally breaks, and she lets out a terrified scream. Unable to handle it, she turns and runs away from the building. But Kosai just laughs, calling out to her and asking what she thought of his performance. He proudly reveals that the severed head was just a hyper-realistic prop he made for the shoot. The rest of the crew is left completely dumbfounded by this sudden, twisted revelation. Kosai then ushers Inako away, telling her to get ready for the real filming to begin. Kosai tells the others he'll call them when the scene is properly set. The rest of the crew can only stare back at him, still reeling from his deception. He adds with a smirk that they shouldn't tell Inako about the prank just yet. Kosai explains they'll reveal the prop head later to maximize the shock value. Ohara, Yukina, and the driver exchange uneasy glances, clearly disturbed by the plan. Miyama finally snaps, shouting that this is no time for jokes. He insists he's just a driver and wants no part in their talk of monsters and bodies. Ohara tries to placate him, saying they'll just film their bit and leave. But as they argue, a dark, monstrous shape watches them from the tree line. Meanwhile, Inako begins her act, claiming to feel a powerful spiritual energy from the swamp. She points dramatically, claiming to feel an immense grudge from a specific spot. Ohara films her, muttering under his breath about her unconvincing performance. But she quickly breaks character, admitting to Kosai that she'd be terrified if any of this were actually real. Miyama, the driver, suddenly steps in, his face grim and serious. He points toward the prop box, questioning what they're even thinking. He insists this is a potential crime scene and they should be calling the authorities. Ohara immediately panics, realizing their shoot will be ruined if the police get involved. But Miyama argues back, terrified that this is the kind of situation they can't escape from. He insists that if they're found here, they'll be the prime suspects, ordering them not to touch the evidence. Ohara can only look on, already stressed about the possibility of another lawsuit. Inako launches into a dramatic monologue, claiming a 500-year-old grudge hangs over the entire village. Ohara watches her, his expression dripping with annoyance at her overacting. She declares that the one responsible for the beheading is still lurking somewhere nearby. But his annoyance suddenly sharpens into a different kind of focus. He grins with greedy excitement, realizing he could be the first to capture the real monster on film. Inako, however, breaks character, genuinely terrified and warning them to stay away from the swamp. Ohara glares at her through the camera, furious that she's going off-script. She then turns to him with a strange request, holding a small skull prop. Back near the bus, Yukina sits alone, a worried expression on her face. She checks her phone again, but the screen confirms what she already knows: no signal. Her frustration grows as she confirms there's still no signal. She declares she's had enough and wants to go home, saying they can just edit the footage they already have. The isolation of the bus only adds to her growing unease. Nearby, the driver Miyama is clearly just as desperate to leave. Yukina's gaze then falls on Misaka, realizing he's the only one who can drive them out of here. She suddenly stands up, creating a distraction by saying she needs the restroom. She then grabs Miyama, asking him to escort her because she's too scared to go alone. But instead of heading to a restroom, she pulls him away from the bus and into the woods. Once they're out of earshot, she asks him a critical question: does he have the keys to the bus? He nervously explains that Misaka is the one holding on to them. Yukina clicks her tongue, her frustration growing with this new obstacle. Her gaze falls back on Misaka, who is completely absorbed in his work. She decides on a new approach, calling out his name to break his concentration. With a disarming smile, she holds up a large bottle and offers him a drink. She sits down beside him, claiming she's too scared to drink all by herself. Misaka looks back, completely baffled by her request to drink at a time like this. But she insists, pouring a drink and asking him to join her for just one toast. He reluctantly accepts the cup, still looking uneasy about the whole situation. Her true plan, however, is to get him drunk enough to steal the bus keys. Unseen by them, another member of the crew sits just a few rows ahead. Misaka begins to boast, taking all the credit for Ohara's current fame. He brags about a previous shoot, revealing it was all just an elaborate setup. Yukina plays along perfectly, pouring him another drink with a cheerful smile. But her expression hardens, frustrated that he isn't getting drunk fast enough. Finally, Misaka stumbles to his feet, the alcohol clearly taking its toll. He mumbles something about needing to find a place to relieve himself. Yukina quickly offers her support, guiding the drunken man toward the bus door. Her friendly facade drops the moment his back is turned, replaced by a cold, determined stare. As she helps him down the steps, her hand deftly slips the bus keys from his pocket. She watches him wander off into the woods, a triumphant smirk spreading across her face. Her expression is cold and resolute, the plan is in motion. She rushes back to the bus, urging Miyama to get them out of there. The driver doesn't hesitate, jamming the key into the ignition. But outside, a sudden noise catches Misaka's attention. He calls out, confused by the sound of the engine starting. Yukina screams at the driver, reminding him of her connection to Ohara. But her true feelings break through, she just wants to escape this cursed place. The tires screech as the bus lurches forward, leaving the village behind. Misaka can only watch in disbelief, shouting for them to wait. Yukina glances back, a flicker of uncertainty on her face. But just as they make their escape, a small figure emerges from the bushes. Yukina and the driver both freeze, recognizing the puppy they left behind. Miyama's eyes widen in dawning horror. He remembers Kosai's twisted plan to get rid of the small animal. And the gruesome result of that plan flashes through his mind. The puppy looks back at them, its eyes filled with a sad innocence. Yukina lets out a terrified scream, trying to warn it away. She yells from the bus window, telling the small creature to run. But the puppy doesn't understand, happily chasing after the departing bus. And in a flash, it's suddenly snatched from the path, disappearing into the leaves. Yukina's eyes widen in utter disbelief at what she's seeing. From the bushes, a grotesque, fleshy form begins to emerge. Its arm has taken the perfect, horrifying shape of the lost puppy. A blood-curdling scream rips through the silent forest. The creature projects an image of the panting, innocent animal. Yukina and Miyama can only stare, their faces pale with terror. A heavy, fleshy foot plants itself firmly on the ground. The Napepo reveals its true, monstrous form, the puppy still attached as its lip. Their terror finally breaks into horrified screams. In a desperate move, one of them slams the bus door shut. Yukina throws her hands up, trying to shield herself from the approaching horror. The creature's puppy-like head stares blankly, its eyes a milky white. From its mouth, slimy tendrils begin to uncoil and reach forward. The fleshy appendages snake into the bus, surrounding the two trapped passengers. Miyama lets out a final, desperate scream of pure terror. He slams his foot on the gas, the tires spinning wildly on the dirt path. But the bus is thrown off course as the monster latches onto its side. The violent impact sends Yukina flying from her seat. The grotesque puppy head continues its silent, horrifying advance. And with a sickening crunch, the creature tears into the vehicle's metal frame. Miyama grips the wheel, his face a mask of pure panic. The bus swerves wildly off the path, heading straight for the clearing of silent, watchful statues. It smashes through the stone figures, sending them scattering across the ground. Inside, both Miyama and Yukina are thrown about by the violent impact. The world turns upside down as the bus finally flips onto its side. Meanwhile, Ohara's eyes widen as he stares at his phone in disbelief. On the screen is a live feed of the grotesque, fleshy monster in the distance. The Napepo slowly rises, its misshapen form a true nightmare made real. Ohara can only watch, a mix of disgust and morbid fascination on his face. He can't believe his eyes, recognizing the creature from the old legends. The Napepo, the fleshy monster from the stories, is horrifyingly real. And Ohara's fear is instantly replaced by a greedy thought: he has to livestream this. Inside the overturned bus, Yukina slowly begins to stir. She looks up to see the driver, Miyama, hanging upside down from his seat. A pale, veiny hand slowly reaches down from the darkness. It makes contact with Miyama's face as a dark fluid begins to drip. The strange substance spreads across his skin, obscuring his features. From within the grotesque mass, a single, bloodshot eye opens wide. Its pupil then detaches, falling away into the abyss below. Yukina scrambles backward, her face a mask of pure terror. The dark, viscous fluid rains down from above. The creature holds up Miyama's head, now a grotesque, twisted mockery of his former self. It then releases its grip, letting the remains fall away. Yukina screams as the same dark substance splatters across her face. She turns and crawls desperately through the wreckage of the bus. With all her strength, she pulls herself out of the shattered doorway. She glances back, a flicker of hope in her eyes as she escapes the immediate danger. But the Napepo is already holding a perfect replica of her head, absorbing it into its fleshy mass. And from her own neck, a writhing mass of tendrils erupts into the... The Napepo's grotesque work is revealed. Misaka's head now sits atop the puppy's small body. His face is a permanent mask of agony, blood dripping from his lifeless mouth. Watching the feed, the remaining crew members can only stare in wide-eyed horror. Inako runs screaming as the Napepo emerges, its arm now a twisted version of Misaka. From the safety of a nearby building, Ohara keeps the camera rolling. Inako runs toward him, desperately calling out his name for help. But he just glares back, ordering her to stay away from him. The lumbering creature continues its advance, Yukina's head now absorbed into its fleshy side. The Misaka puppy hybrid lets out a final, blood-curdling scream. Ohara and Inako are frozen in place, utterly stunned by the nightmare before them. The Napepo looms over the wrecked bus, its form radiating pure rage. Its fleshy hand suddenly shoots out, grabbing Kosa by the ankle. He's dragged across the ground with brutal, unstoppable force. Ohara and Inako can only watch in horror as the creature pulls him away. Iri and the others are frozen, their faces pale with shock. The ground is left stained with the gruesome aftermath of the attack. A voice cuts through the silence, calling out Ohara's name from the trees. It's Iri pointing toward something deeper in the woods. He directs their attention to a small, weathered shrine hidden among the trees. Inside sits a shrouded figure, its true nature hidden from view. Ohara realizes the statues weren't broken, they were made headless from the start. The image of the Napepo flashes in his mind, its form just as featureless. But Inako just smiles, finding the small shrine completely unimpressive. She suggests they just film here, making up a story about the villagers' grudges. Ohara glares at her, telling her to stop before she ruins the entire act. Just then Ari appears from the trees, his expression serious. He holds up a hand, silencing the bickering group with a single gesture. The mercenary explains that one of the motion sensors he set up has just been triggered. A small device strapped to a tree flashes, confirming his words. The entire crew turns to stare into the dark woods, their blood running cold. The story flashes to a man screaming in desperation about a 5-day deadline. Back in the present, Ohara recognizes the voice as Miyama's, confused as to why he's here. A hand suddenly shoots out from the darkness, grabbing someone by the ankle. The Napepo emerges from the trees, with Kosai's head already trapped in its mouth. The remaining crew members can only stare, their faces a mask of pure shock. From its perch, the Misaka puppy hybrid lets out a chilling scream, cursing them all. Inako recoils, her eyes wide with a terror she can no longer contain. Kosai's eyes flash with rage as he's dragged away by the creature. The monstrous hybrid then lunges forward, its claws extended for an attack. Ari is frozen in place, his face a mask of utter disbelief at the unfolding horror. The monstrous hybrid lunges forward, sending Ohara flying backward from the force of its attack. Its grotesque form, a fusion of Misaka and the puppy, is a true nightmare made real. Inako screams in pure terror, scrambling away from the approaching horror. But in her panic, she loses her footing and tumbles to the ground. The creature lands right in front of her, its twisted face inches from her own. But then something strange happens as the arm attached to its head begins to snap. The limb tears away from the body, dissolving into a dark, viscous fluid. It falls to the ground, a useless, severed piece of the monstrous whole. The creature's main body slumps forward, its momentum gone. Inako can only stare in stunned silence, completely baffled by what just happened. The main body of the Napepo looms over them, still clutching Kosai in its maw. But Ari suddenly lunges forward, grabbing the creature's arm with both hands. With a surge of incredible strength, he rips the entire limb from its socket. The severed end reveals a mass of writhing, fleshy tendrils. In his hands, the grotesque arm begins to dissolve into a dark fluid, melting away until nothing is left but a dripping residue. The Napepo stands silently, its severed limb already beginning to regrow. Ohara captures the entire impossible event on his phone, his eyes wide with shock. He can barely process what he's seeing, realizing this is a genuine monster. Inako, still on the ground, looks on in a state of utter confusion. Ohara keeps filming, taunting the monster to come and get them for his audience. Ari shouts a warning, trying to draw the creature's attention away from Inako. The psychic scrambles backward, her face a mask of pure terror. Ari then hurls a small rock with surprising force. But it strikes Inako directly in the head, making her cry out in pain. She looks up in stunned disbelief, confused by the sudden attack. The Napepo looms over her, holding Kosai's head like a grotesque trophy. From its fleshy body, a swirling orifice begins to open. It reveals a horrifying, dripping maw lined with hundreds of teeth. The creature then brings its arm down, slamming Kosai's head into the terrified psychic. The force of the blow causes Inako's face to melt away, revealing the skull beneath in a horrifying display. The story then flashes back, cutting away to a different time entirely. We're shown a cheap-looking Power Stone bracelet, the source of a past conflict. A furious customer complains to Inako over a video call, claiming the bracelet she sold him melted on his dashboard. He insists that's impossible for a real Power Stone and demands a hefty refund. But Inako, ever the performer, simply considers his words with a thoughtful expression. She then declares that his car must be cursed, urging him to get rid of it immediately. The man doesn't buy it for a second, accusing her of selling him cheap plastic and trying to scam him. The screen is then flooded with negative reviews from other disgruntled customers. And we see the woman behind the operation, lamenting that her merchandise is no longer selling due to the bad press. Desperate for a solution to her failing business, she realizes she has to do something drastic. A horrifying vision flashes through the narrative, showing her being consumed by the very monster she pretended to hunt. Back in the present, the remaining crew can only stare, their faces frozen in abject terror. Inako's body lies twisted on the forest floor. Her face completely gone, replaced by a grotesque ruin of bone and flesh. A closer look reveals the horrifying aftermath, her features mangled beyond recognition. Ohara stares in disbelief, realizing that somehow she's still alive. Another crew member covers his mouth, overcome with nausea at the sight. He turns away, unable to hold back his sickness as Irie watches on. The mercenary quickly grabs him, desperately trying to keep him quiet in the face of the lurking danger. Irie grabs the panicked crew member, desperately trying to keep him from making any noise. The Napepo begins to drag Inako's mangled body deeper into the woods. Her form is pulled across the forest floor with a sickening scrape. The grotesque creature retreats with its prize, disappearing into the dense tree line. The remaining survivors can only watch as it vanishes from sight. They stare into the darkness, wondering where the creature has taken her. Overwhelmed by terror, the man in the camo jacket makes a break for it. But Irie lunges forward, grabbing him before he can run into the open. Ohara shouts at the mercenary, telling him to let the man go. But their argument is cut short as the monster continues its slow, horrifying retreat. The story then cuts back to the survivors of the first group, staring at the wreckage of their vehicle. The girl pleads with her friend, desperate to run now that their bus is destroyed. But he knows it's far too dangerous to try and cross the mountain pass on foot at night. She argues they can't stay here with that creature around, insisting they find a signal to call the police. The boy considers it, thinking the video of the severed head is enough evidence to hand over. They find an old abandoned house, their only hope for shelter. The two of them slip inside, seeking refuge from the horrors outside. With all their strength, they barricade the heavy wooden door. He tells her they'll have to hide in this storehouse until morning. But she looks around nervously, questioning if they'll truly be safe from the monster here. The story then cuts away, focusing on a grim-faced man in sunglasses. He's with a young woman who shivers nervously in the dark. He notices her thin shirt and how she's trembling from the cold. Taking off his glasses, he decides to act. He gently drapes his own jacket over her shoulders. She looks up, offering a quiet word of thanks for his kindness. He then asks if she's really okay with abandoning Ohara. She admits she's too scared to go looking for him, especially with no phone signal. Her mind drifts to the past, remembering when she first started dating Takeyuki and feeling that things have soured. The story cuts away, focusing on a man in sunglasses with a calculating look. In a brief flashback, he makes a shocking proposition to a young woman, asking her to join his team. But the narrative snaps back to the storehouse, where the boy has turned on his fellow survivor. She struggles against his grip, screaming for him to let her go. With a desperate kick, she breaks free and sends him stumbling to the floor. She tries to flee up a set of stairs, but he calls out for her to wait. He lunges forward, grabbing her by the ankle before she can escape. He then taunts her, revealing a shocking connection to Ohara's crew. She tells him to let go, but he only tightens his grip, his expression turning grim. Suddenly, her eyes widen in absolute terror at something just beyond him. The boy grabs her from behind, his face contorted with rage as she struggles. The scene then cuts to the vast, desolate swamp under a gray sky. The Napepo stands in the shallows, dragging Inako's lifeless body with it. Her mangled form is pulled through the murky water. A closer look reveals the horrifying aftermath of its brutal attack. The creature then lifts her into the air, holding her upside down by a single leg. With a powerful heave, it tosses her body into the deeper water. It then turns its attention to the boy from the storehouse, swinging him like a rag doll. The monster watches as his body splashes down into the swamp. Ohara and the other survivor look on, questioning what the creature is even doing. Inako's body sinks beneath the murky surface of the swamp. Her hand twitches for a moment, a final silent plea. Then with a violent shudder, her form is pulled apart, consumed by the unseen horrors lurking in the water. A few ripples on the surface are all that remain of her. Ohara and the other survivor can only stare, wondering what just happened. The Napepo then rises from the swamp, its lumpy form dripping with water. They look on in disbelief, unable to comprehend the creature before them. But their confusion turns to horror as a new head sprouts from its fleshy neck. It's the boy from the storehouse, his face a permanent mask of agony. The monster looms over the final survivor from the first group. It then turns, its grotesque work now complete. Ohara and the other man can only stare, paralyzed by the sight. They slowly back away from the edge of the horrifying swamp. But they can't bring themselves to look away from the murky water. Ohara nervously asks if something else is still lurking in there. His eyes widen in a sudden, dawning terror. A mangled skeletal face breaks the surface of the water. They realize with horror that their friends were used as bait. The man in the camo jacket finally breaks, running for his life. He sprints down a long, dark hallway, running for his life. Reaching a set of doors, he slams them shut behind him. His abandoned laptop and equipment are left behind in his haste. He finds a corner to hide in, pulling a dusty cloth over his head. Peeking out, his eyes are wide with a terror he can't contain. He huddles in the darkness, trying to silence his own ragged breaths. A bead of sweat rolls down his cheek as he listens for any sign of pursuit. His hand fumbles for a nearby bag, desperate for any kind of distraction. Inside, he finds a small stash of packaged snacks. He begins to eat, the simple act a futile attempt to calm his shattered nerves. He shoves the snacks into his mouth, a desperate act of self-soothing. Huddled in the corner, he mutters to himself, consumed by regret for ever coming here. But his quiet despair is shattered by a piercing scream from somewhere outside. The story then cuts back to the two survivors in the storehouse, flashing back to when she accidentally fell on top of him. He winces in pain from the sudden impact. She complains about the awkward landing, telling him he's hurting her. He quickly shushes her, warning her not to make any loud noises. She looks out the window, her expression filled with confusion and fear. The two of them can only huddle together in the darkness, waiting for the night to end. He holds her close as she panics, asking what they'll do if the monster finds them. A map lays out the grim geography of their situation, showing the village, the headless statues, and where their friends were lost. Inside the storehouse, the two survivors are suddenly confronted by a hooded figure, their brief moment of safety shattered. The figure lowers his hood, revealing himself to be Ohara, who stares back in utter disbelief. The rest of his crew recognizes the girl, realizing she's the camper from the original viral video. As the boy shields his terrified friend, the crew can only stare, shocked to find the subjects of the legend are actually alive. But the boy is completely baffled, having no idea what video they're talking about. The bearded crew member steps forward, accusing them of being the ones who uploaded the clip in the first place. Ohara suddenly shoves his phone forward, forcing the boy to look. The boy stares at the screen, his expression turning to shock as he sees the footage for the first time. He admits that they filmed the incident, but insists they never shared it with anyone. One of the crew members suddenly remembers they couldn't livestream because there was no signal. The bearded man then asks the chilling question, if they didn't upload the video, who did? But the boy ignores him, pleading for help and asking if they have a car to get his injured friend to a hospital. The bearded crew member looks down, questioning his claim about an injury. But a look at the girl's chest reveals a deep, gruesome wound. The crew members recoil in shock at the sight of her condition. The boy explains that the monster is the one who did this to her. He asks them desperately if they've seen it too, the strange, fleshy creature. A flashback shows the Napepo, its body covered in strange, ice-stalked growths. The creature looms over the original group of friends, a horrifying confirmation of the boy's story. He describes a different creature entirely, a limbless lump of flesh with a horrifying maw. The others can only listen, struggling to comprehend this new horror. He explains that this creature bit down on his friend's head and began to lift her entire body off the ground. Her neck stretched grotesquely as she was pulled into the air. The bearded man's face twists in horror at the gruesome tale. The memory of the creature chasing them with their friend's head is still fresh in his mind. He recounts how they all scattered, losing their belongings in the ensuing chaos. But the crew is confused, pointing out that the monster they saw had limbs. The boy ignores their questions, focused only on his friend who now has a fever and needs a doctor. The bearded man and the girl can only listen, stunned by the horrifying account. The boy then explains that their own bus was also destroyed in the chaos. He looks down at his injured friend, his voice filled with desperation. She struggles to breathe, the fever clearly taking its toll on her. A sudden rustling sound echoes from the dark woods around them. The crew members whisper to each other, wondering if the monster is still nearby. The bearded man turns to Ohara, demanding to know where a creature that large could have gone. Ohara insists they've filmed more than enough, and it's time to get out of the village and call the police. But the bearded man refuses, calling this a once-in-a-lifetime chance they can't just throw away. He argues that if the police get involved, they'll never get another opportunity to film the creature. The bearded man stares back, completely baffled by Ohara's logic. He decides to split up, telling Ohara he'll go search for the creature on his own. He storms off, shouting that this is no time for jokes. He insists he's not going to risk his life and plans to get out of this village immediately. But as he runs, he wonders if Ohara even noticed the other creature. Because just outside, another bizarre creature has appeared, this one resembling a dog in a tattered dress. Ohara winds up, preparing to throw something to create a distraction. His projectile strikes the strange creature, making it cry out in pain. And all the while he keeps the camera rolling, capturing the entire bizarre encounter. The footage on his screen confirms the existence of yet another monster in these woods. Ohara decides he's done with this whole mess, realizing his livestream is a lost cause. The group makes their way toward one of the abandoned houses, seeking shelter from the horrors outside. One of the crew members suggests they at least try to treat the girl's wound, saying they have some medical supplies. Another adds that while they only have disinfectant, she has some painkillers they can use. Meanwhile, the crew member who ran off earlier is still hiding, his face pale with fear. Suddenly, the door to his hiding spot is thrown open with a violent crash. A dark figure stands silhouetted in the doorway, its presence filling him with dread. His eyes dart down to his abandoned equipment, left behind in his panic. The others arrive to find the room completely ransacked, with food and supplies thrown everywhere. The terrified man can only stare back, unable to explain who could have done this. The bearded man holds the injured girl, realizing their entire week's worth of food has been destroyed. The boy from the first group offers to help, saying he has bandages in his bag. But another crew member admits her own medical supplies are back in the bus, and she's too terrified to go back for them. Elsewhere, the crew member in the camo jacket continues to hide, praying the monster doesn't return. He listens intently to the silence, sweat beading on his forehead. But a dark figure suddenly appears right behind him, shattering his brief moment of safety. Ari grabs him by the hair, dragging him out of his hiding spot with a furious roar. The others can only stare as he's thrown to the floor, questioning what he was thinking. He looks up, his face pale with fear as he tries to explain what happened. He then shouts that it wasn't him, a monster is the one who ate all their food. The others can only stare back, completely baffled by his wild claims. He frantically explains that a 10-meter-tall monster appeared out of nowhere, attacking Inako while he tried to save her. He says he ran for his life, but the creature followed him here and devoured every last bit of their food. The bearded man questions his story, asking if the monster really just left after eating. He tries to process the information, realizing the creature they saw was different, and that Inako is likely gone for good. But the boy from the first group cuts in, desperately pleading for them to help his injured friend. The girl turns to the man in the camo jacket, asking why their supposed survival expert can't perform first aid. Her question draws everyone's attention to the gruesome, festering wound on the other girl's chest. The camo-clad man's face drains of all color, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated shock. Overwhelmed by the sight, he promptly faints, collapsing onto the wooden floor. The girl scoffs, muttering that she knew their so-called expert was all talk. They decide to just leave him there and focus on treating the injured girl instead. Outside, the forest grows darker as the last of the daylight fades away. A sudden rustling sound echoes from the dense undergrowth nearby. The bearded man looks around nervously, wondering where the creature could have gone. He decides to head back to the abandoned house before it gets completely dark. He glances at his phone, only to see the familiar no-signal icon. He curses in frustration, realizing his phone is completely useless out here. He walks past a broken statue, remembering their original plan for a livestream. And just ahead, the grotesque form of the Napepo appears from behind the trees. The bearded man's face twists with pure, unadulterated rage. He screams out, blaming Ohara for all the death and destruction. Ohara can only stare back, completely stunned by the sudden accusation. The story then flashes back to a different time, and a small, innocent kitten. Yukina explains to the others that she rescued the small animal from a shelter. She then reveals her plan to use the kitten for a live stream to gain sympathy and views. The stream is a massive success, with donations and followers pouring in. But the bearded man suggests there's an even better way to profit from the animal. He then forces a strange substance down the poor creature's throat. The kitten immediately gets sick, its body rejecting the unknown concoction. They claim the kitten is suffering from a mysterious, untreatable illness. Yukina then goes live, tearfully begging her audience for donations to save it. But behind the scenes, the poor animal's condition only worsens. Yukina is horrified to find the kitten has passed away, as the bearded man admits he may have used too much bleach. He smirks, callously suggesting they can just get another one and repeat the scam. The flashback ends on a grim note, a testament to their cruelty. The story then cuts to a rival streamer, who gleefully exposes their entire scheme online. The fallout is immediate, with Ohara confronting the man who leaked the story and cost them their followers. Back in the present, the bearded man glares at Ohara, accusing him of planning to use him again. His face is a mask of grim determination, no longer willing to be a pawn in Ohara's games. The bearded man screams at Ohara, demanding to know where the monster went. Ohara just turns away, his expression unreadable. But the Napepo is right behind him, holding the boy from the first group by the throat. The bearded man's face drains of all color, his eyes wide with terror. He snaps, landing a brutal punch right across Ohara's face. With a scream of pure panic, he turns and runs for his life. But the Napepo is already there, its new head reaching out with a desperate hand. A fleshy appendage grabs him from behind, silencing his screams. The monster holds up its prize, a perfect, bloody replica of the bearded man's head. His face is frozen in a final, silent expression of agony. The monster's arm whips through the air with brutal speed. Ohara can only watch, his face frozen in disbelief. The Napepo then turns its attention to the last survivor of the original group. Nearby, the grotesque Misaka puppy hybrid begins to droop and dissolve. The girl's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The creature's hand closes around the boy's head. As its own neck begins to writhe and contort, it swings its massive body around, with the boy still in its grasp. Its other arm sprouts multiple new limbs, twisting into a horrifying new shape. Ohara stares, trying to comprehend the creature's impossible biology. The girl watches in horror as the grotesque puppy hybrid finally dissolves before her. The boy's hand reaches out desperately from the monster's grasp. His body is slowly consumed, pulled into the creature's fleshy mass. A dark, viscous fluid covers his face as tendrils begin to sprout. The girl can only stare in stunned silence at the horrifying transformation. The Napepo holds up its newest creation, the boy's head now part of its own body. Ohara stumbles backward, his face a mask of pure terror at the sight. He can't comprehend the impossible monster that now stands before him. It's a grotesque fusion of the boy and the bearded man, their heads joined on a single neck. With a scream of pure panic, he leaps away to escape the creature's reach. He lands hard on the ground after his desperate leap, bringing his boot down with a sickening crunch. But his expression twists in shock as he realizes his mistake. The girl from the first group cries out, clutching her leg in agony. He's accidentally broken her ankle in his panicked escape. Now both of them are trapped on the forest floor, and the grotesque Napepo turns its attention toward the easy prey. Its hybrid face stares down at them with a cold, predatory gaze. The girl can only look up, her face a mask of pure terror. She writhes on the ground, completely helpless before the approaching horror. The girl cries out, her face contorted in agony from the broken bone. Ohara looks on in horror, realizing his panicked escape has doomed them both. He's frozen on the ground, trapped by his own terrible mistake. And the grotesque creature slowly lumbers toward its two helpless victims. He can only pant in terror, his mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. The story then cuts to the wreckage of the bus, where a lone figure stands. It's one of the other crew members, who seems to have found something inside. She pulls out a box of painkillers, admitting it's all she could find. The remaining survivors gather around the injured girl, discussing their limited options for first aid. Ohara watches on, a flicker of concern on his face as he considers their next move. The bearded man questions their plan, asking how they're supposed to get the bus running again. He presses the point, demanding to know how they could possibly escape. Their situation is grim. The bus is wrecked, the driver is gone, and the others haven't returned. The boy from the first group can only look on, his face etched with worry. Inside the house, they find a wall of old portraits, each one violently defaced. The bearded man tries to comfort the injured girl as the boy watches them. A closer look reveals the faces in the photos have been completely scratched out. The boy stares in confusion, wondering why someone would do this. The bearded man realizes that Ohara and Kosai are still missing. He turns to Irie, asking if there's been any word, but the silence is his only answer. The bearded man admits that just waiting around for the others might be pointless. The girl in the cat shirt panics, insisting they need to run away from this place now. He agrees but glances at the injured girl, questioning if they can escape while carrying her. Her expression hardens as a cold idea begins to form in her mind. She whispers a chilling suggestion: they should just leave the injured girl behind. The boy from the first group overhears, his eyes widening in pure disbelief. She argues that the girl is a stranger and they have no obligation to risk their lives for her. As the injured girl groans in pain, she urges the bearded man to abandon her and escape. The boy can only stare, his mind reeling at their cold-heartedness. He realizes with horror that they're willing to abandon not just her, but their own friends as well. The girl in the cat shirt just smirks, while the boy can only look on in disgust. A flashback shows the other monster, the limbless one, attacking his friend. He remembers watching helplessly as she was struck down by the creature. He realizes with shame that he's no better than them for running away himself. The injured girl suddenly grabs his shirt, calling out his name. With tears in her eyes, she begs him not to leave her behind. Her desperate plea seems to snap him out of his despair. He turns to the others, his expression now filled with a new resolve. He tells them he knows a shortcut out of the mountains and will guide them if they help carry his friend. The girl in the cat shirt looks skeptical, questioning if they can really make it out before nightfall. The girl in the cat shirt considers his offer, clearly finding the whole ordeal a nuisance. The boy from the first group glares back, angered by her selfish attitude. But Irie suddenly cuts in, his expression serious as he tells them to be quiet. He holds up a hand, demanding absolute silence from the entire group. His eyes are wide with alarm as he explains that he heard a strange sound outside. A wave of panic washes over them, their argument instantly forgotten. The boy from the first group turns, his face tense with a new kind of fear. They all stare toward the window, peering into the oppressive darkness. A hand suddenly reaches out from the shadows, grabbing a fistful of fabric. The boy is violently yanked backward, his face contorted in shock and pain. The boy stares in shock as a hammer is raised threateningly toward his head. It's the girl in the cat shirt, who stands over him with a stunned expression. The others cry out in alarm, calling Ohara by his real name, Takeyuki. The boy collapses to the floor, looking up at his attacker in disbelief. He winces, commenting on the terrible pain radiating from his leg. The girl in the cat shirt tries to downplay the injury, insisting it's just a sprain. Irie looks on with a grim expression, realizing Kosai is likely gone for good. The bearded man points out their grim reality. They now have 2 injured people to care for. The boy from the first group cuts in, warning them all to stay away from the swamp. He explains that something far more terrifying than the Napepo lurks within its murky depths. The others can only listen, their faces pale with a new kind of dread. The boy explains that the shortcut to the main road passes right by the swamp, making it too dangerous to cross with 2 injured people. The bearded man decides they'll have to wait until morning, asking Irie if he knows how to make a primitive alarm. Irie explains it's a simple device made of bamboo, designed to warn them of any intruders. The plan is to hang these clappers all around the house as a makeshift security system. With no other choice, the survivors get to work, setting up their crude defenses against the night. But as they work, the bearded man pulls the boy from the first group aside. He says he needs to talk to him about something important. He then makes a chilling suggestion, that the 2 of them should just run for it alone. He argues they could reach the main road by morning and call for help, insisting it's the best option. The boy stares back, his mind reeling from the man's cold suggestion. He remembers the girl in the cat shirt's earlier words, realizing they're all the same. The bearded man tells him to stop talking such foolish nonsense. But the boy refuses, declaring he could never abandon his friends just to save himself. The bearded man just clicks his tongue, clearly annoyed by this display of loyalty. The boy glares back, saying he despises people who only pretend to be righteous. But his words only draw a condescending smirk from the man. The boy tells him to stop with the empty platitudes. The bearded man then turns the tables, asking what happened to the boy's other friends, implying he already abandoned them once. The accusation hits home, and the boy can only stare back in horrified silence. The bearded man then makes a chilling offer, claiming he's found the boy's friends. Stunned, the boy asks if it's true as the man tells him to follow. He leads him down a narrow path, deeper into the oppressive woods. With a cruel smirk, the man points ahead, saying they're just over there. The boy looks down, his expression turning from hope to confusion. That confusion then twists into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Lying in the murky water is the grotesque, severed head of his friend. The scene cuts away, filled with frustrated voices complaining about the situation. The girl in the cat shirt looks on, a thoughtful expression on her face. The boy from the first group looks up at her, his own face filled with uncertainty. A sudden scream shatters the silence of the abandoned house. The boy snaps back to consciousness, finding himself surrounded by the remaining crew. The girl in the cat shirt leans in, asking with a disarming smile if he's okay. He ignores her, frantically demanding to know what happened to his friend. His gaze falls upon the injured girl, his voice filled with concern as he calls out her name. She looks back at him, her expression dazed as she asks what's wrong. He stammers, unable to explain the horrifying vision he just witnessed in the swamp. But she dismisses his fear, her face suddenly a featureless blank as she tells him to rest. He ignores the impossible sight, promising her they'll escape and get to a hospital in the morning. She can only listen, her eyes filled with a quiet, haunting sadness. The injured girl looks up, her voice weak as she tries to say something. But the boy quickly shushes her, his eyes wide with a sudden panic. A faint clattering sound echoes through the silent house, drawing everyone's attention. O'Hara recognizes it immediately. One of their bamboo alarms has been triggered. The man in the camo jacket begins to sweat, his face pale with fear. The girl in the cat shirt clutches her hands, her bravado completely gone. The bearded man's expression turns grim, knowing exactly what that sound means. The boy holds his friend tight, both of them staring into the oppressive darkness. The clattering continues, a clear signal that they are no longer alone. The entire group is frozen in place, their makeshift sanctuary now a trap. The girl in the cat shirt laughs it off, claiming it was just a bird that triggered the alarm. But the injured girl from the first group just stares back in silence. The bearded man turns to her, asking if she's sure she didn't touch anything. He explains that if she didn't, they'll know who's responsible by morning. She looks up, her eyes wide with a silent, fearful understanding. The bearded man then lays out a plan for them to take turns keeping watch until sunrise. Outside, the abandoned house is shrouded in the oppressive darkness of the night. The boy from the first group takes the first watch as the others try to get some rest. But the injured girl is woken by a sound, muttering in her sleep for the noise to stop. She looks at her phone, at a picture of her friends from a happier, simpler time. The injured girl, Kazumi, looks up at her friend with a pained expression. She weakly calls out his name, Makoto. He asks if she's okay, worried that she's unable to sleep. But she can only apologize, her voice filled with regret. He tries to comfort her, insisting she has nothing to be sorry for. She argues back, claiming that everything that happened is her fault. Tears stream down her face as she admits she never imagined this outcome. Mikoto can only stare back, completely confused by her confession. The story then flashes back, revealing how she first heard about the cursed place. She was told about Alka village by the very friend who would later kick the statue's head. The flashback reveals her friend sitting with a man who explains his plan to turn the abandoned village into a campsite. He mentions his previous mystery tour idea was a failure, and asks if her group does video streaming. The man then makes his pitch. He wants them to film their camping trip to promote the village. Her friend seems hesitant, explaining they already had plans to go somewhere else. But he presses on, offering a small payment for their cooperation. Tempted by the money, she agrees to at least discuss the offer with the others. Back in the present, Mikoto listens, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. Kazumi sobs, blaming herself for not knowing a real monster was waiting for them. Mikoto asks who the man was, but she admits she only knew him by his last name Hasuda. A sudden voice calls out from behind them, and Mikoto turns to see dark figures looming outside the window. The bearded man reacts with alarm, demanding to know more about this man named Hasuda. He turns to Ohara, asking if he also heard about this village from a supposedly reliable source. Because the man who introduced him to this very location was also named Hasuda. The crew looks on in disbelief, realizing they were all lured here by the same person. Ohara presses for more information, but the bearded man admits he knows nothing beyond the name. He then remembers that the one who introduced him to Hasuda in the first place is suddenly right behind him as the limbless monster crashes through the window. Its horrifying maw clamps down on the bearded man with brutal force. The others can only watch, their faces frozen in pure, unadulterated shock. And just like that, his body is torn apart in a sickening display of violence. The creature's horrifying maw closes around the bearded man's head. As it thrashes wildly, the remaining survivors scatter in a blind panic. The monster's foot lands heavily on the remains of its victim. Kazumi screams from the floor, desperately telling Mikoto to run for his life. Ohara shouts in terror, pointing out that the creature's head is its weak point. Mikoto grabs a nearby hammer, realizing he has to aim for its head. With a desperate cry, he swings the tool with all his strength. The hammer connects with a sickening impact, striking the monster's skull. Mikoto lets out a terrified scream, his fear fueling the attack. He brings the hammer down again and again, trying to fight back against the impossible horror. From the doorway, Ohara and the girl in the cat shirt watch the brutal confrontation unfold. The creature's head is a mangled ruin, its features destroyed by the repeated blows. Mikoto stands over the fallen monster, panting and covered in its remains. The hammer slips from his exhausted grasp, clattering onto the floor. Ohara's eyes widen as he processes the impossible scene before him. For a moment, there's only a stunned silence between the boy and the defeated creature. But the monster's body begins to slump and dissolve into a dark, viscous fluid. Ohara shouts from the doorway that it's not dead, as Mikoto screams back in frustration. He argues that without a head, the creature can't possibly see them anymore. But with no time to waste, he grabs Kazumi, desperately trying to pull her to safety. The story flashes back to the first group, desperately trying to escape across a rooftop. Back in the present, Ohara turns to Irie, asking where they keep the generator. Mikoto doesn't hesitate, grabbing the heavy piece of equipment. With a look of grim determination, he prepares to act. He hurls the generator with all his might toward the dissolving monster. It lands squarely on the creature's remains, which are still writhing on the floor. Ohara then steps forward, a lighter flicking to life in his hand. A massive explosion rips through the abandoned house. The survivors can only stare in shock at the fiery aftermath. They watch from the tree line as the entire building is consumed by flames. From a distance, the fire rages, a beacon of destruction in the dark mountains. The story then cuts to a different house, where the survivors have found temporary shelter. Inside, Kazumi slowly begins to stir, her eyes fluttering open. Nearby, Mikoto sits up, his entire body aching from the ordeal. He looks over at Kazumi, realizing she's been unconscious this whole time. He cautiously peeks out of the room, checking to see if the coast is clear. With the hammer still in hand, he steps outside, ready for whatever might be waiting. He looks around, wondering if the monster is truly gone for good. All that's left of the other house is a field of charred, skeletal remains. But a sudden noise draws Ohara's attention, his expression turning to alarm. Ohara stands amidst the smoldering ruins, surveying the aftermath of the explosion. He turns to Mikoto, asking if he's okay after everything they've just been through. Mikoto admits his leg is still in pain from their desperate escape. But his attention is suddenly drawn elsewhere as he points toward the wreckage. In the center of the charred debris, a strange object glows with an eerie light. A dark, lumpy mass sits unmoving in the center of the destruction. Ohara wonders aloud if this is what's left of the creature they just fought. A sudden flashback shows the monster's horrifying maw clamping down on its victim. Ohara recoils, the memory of the brutal attack still fresh in his mind. But back in the present, they can only stare at the motionless lump, believing the monster is finally gone for good. But Ohara wonders how such a massive fire and all that smoke went completely unnoticed. He explains that because they're in a basin, the blaze was likely hidden from anyone at the foot of the mountain. Mikoto's focus remains singular. They have to get Kazumi to a hospital and soon. Ohara agrees, declaring they have no more business in this cursed village. Mikoto can only look on, the weight of their situation settling upon him. Ohara then turns to him, admitting he has a favor to ask. The girl in the cat shirt struggles under the weight of the still unconscious man in the camo jacket. As the group makes their way through the woods, he complains about having to be carried by a girl. Mikoto apologizes for the trouble, promising they just need to hold on until they reach the main road. Ohara looks back, already planning to edit and upload the monster footage the second they get a signal. He then asks her about the video she filmed, the memory of the limbless monster looming large. Kazumi looks up, her expression weary as she tries to recall the details. He presses her for more information, needing to know everything she remembers. He asks if the man named Hasuda gave her any other instructions or details. But she admits that she never saw or spoke to the man again after that one meeting. All she knows is that he claimed to be from a travel agency that was promoting the village. She then looks up, questioning why he's so interested in all of this now. Ohara just offers a chilling smile, telling her it's nothing to worry about. But her confusion instantly twists into a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Because the horrifying, tooth-filled maw of the monster is now right in front of her. The limbless creature from the stories appears, its horrifying maw wide open. The girl in the cat shirt shoves the camo-clad man aside as they scramble to escape. She winces, the terror of the moment etched onto her face. The creature looms over Kazumi, who is trapped and helpless on the ground. A silent scream rips from her as she stares into the abyss of its mouth. But Mikoto lunges forward, pulling her out of the monster's path. Just as it prepares to strike, he looks back in disbelief, wondering if this new creature can even see them. But a closer look reveals the horrifying truth. The bearded man's head is now part of its body. His lifeless eyes stare out from the grotesque fleshy mass. Mikoto's eyes widen in absolute horror at the sight before him. He recognizes the face of his friend Ryoko, now fused with the limbless monster. The grotesque hybrid lurches forward, its movement sickening and unnatural. He grabs Kazumi, desperately shouting for her to get up and run. The memory of his smiling friend flashes through his mind, a stark contrast to the nightmare he now faces. The story flashes back to a simpler time, with Ryoko first hearing about the infamous Alka village. Her friends listen with interest, intrigued by the idea of visiting such an unusual place. But Ryoko seems hesitant, reminding them they already had plans to visit her grandmother. Her friend presses the issue, pointing out that a trip to the village would be a much cheaper alternative. She explains that she's short on cash after a recent event, making the closer destination more appealing. Back in the present, Mikoto looks on with regret, apologizing to his lost friend for changing their plans. He holds Kazumi tight as the grotesque monster looms over them, Ryoko's head now part of its form. Ohara and the girl in the cat shirt scream from the sidelines, telling him to crush its head. Mikoto's face hardens with a new, desperate resolve. The bearded man's head, now fused to the creature, stares out with lifeless eyes. Mikoto grits his teeth, his grief turning into pure rage. Ohara lunges forward, his face a mask of grim determination. He tackles the monster, driving his shoulder into the bearded man's head with brutal force. The grotesque head is knocked aside, its expression frozen in a silent grimace. Mikoto can only watch in horror, still clutching the terrified Kazumi. But Ohara suddenly screams, trying to stop Mikoto's desperate attack. He grabs the boy, physically holding him back from the limbless creature. Ohara's face is filled with a strange, sudden realization. Mikoto screams back, telling him to stop interfering with his revenge. He struggles against Ohara's grip, desperate to finish the fight. His eyes are filled with a cold, determined fury. Kazumi can only watch on, completely confused by what's happening. The girl in the cat shirt is equally stunned by Ohara's sudden intervention. But the monster has gone completely still, its attack halted mid-lunge. And a dark, viscous fluid suddenly erupts from its body, spraying directly into Ohara's face. The monster's eye bursts in a spray of dark fluid, splattering across Mikoto's horrified face. Ohara stumbles back, covered in the same substance, completely stunned by the sudden turn of events. The others can only watch from the trees, calling out Ohara's real name in a panic. He stands frozen, his features completely obscured by the dark, viscous liquid. But a closer look reveals a horrifying truth. The monster's maw has somehow entered his eye. His own pupil is gone, replaced by the creature's empty, circular gaze. Kazumi rushes forward to help, with Mikoto right behind her trying to reach the afflicted streamer. They both scream out in terror, realizing the monster's attack wasn't what it seemed. Because the creature has now latched onto Kazumi, its maw closing around her entire body. And Mikoto can only watch, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Mikoto lunges forward, his hand passing through the space where Kazumi's head just was. He can only watch as her body is consumed by the creature. His eyes widen in a silent scream of pure, unadulterated horror. The limbless monster now holds Kazumi's headless form, the bearded man's head still attached to its neck. Ohara stumbles back, his own face a mask of agony and confusion. He clutches his head, realizing his own eye has been dislodged in the chaos. The other two survivors look on, completely frozen by the terrifying scene. The girl in the cat shirt feels a strange, warm liquid running down her leg. Mikoto's face is a portrait of absolute despair, having lost the one person he was trying to save. The monster turns, revealing a new, horrifying eye has opened on its body, lined with countless teeth. From the creature's horrifying new eye, slimy tendrils begin to uncoil. They snake toward Mikoto, who can only stare in abject horror. One of the appendages wraps around Kazumi's ankle and begins to drag her lifeless body away from the scene. The monster retreats into the woods, pulling its prize along with it. Mikoto is left sitting in the dirt, completely broken by the loss. Ohara stumbles blindly, screaming that he can't see anything at all. He reaches out toward the girl in the cat shirt, desperate for answers. He begs her to tell him what's happened to his face, his own eye now dangling from its socket. But she can only recoil in terror, completely speechless at the gruesome sight. But the girl in the cat shirt just breaks into a fit of wild, unhinged laughter. The man in the camo jacket can only stare, stunned by her complete mental break. Overwhelmed by the horror, he turns and makes a run for it. He glances back one last time at the laughing girl, abandoning his crew. With a final burst of speed, he disappears into the dense, dark woods. Mikoto, meanwhile, is still frozen, his face stained with the creature's remains. Tears of grief and despair stream down his cheek, mixing with the dark fluid. The three remaining survivors are left scattered, their group completely shattered. Ohara sits on the ground, his mind struggling to process the impossible scene. He looks over, his one good eye wide with shock as he calls out Mikoto's name. Mikoto stares into the woods, his face a mask of disbelief at what he sees. A young woman peers from behind a tree, her eyes wide with absolute terror. Her gaze is locked on him, a silent scream frozen in her expression. She looks on in pure, unadulterated horror. Mikoto's hand tightens around the hammer, his knuckles turning white. He raises the weapon, ready to strike down the figure before him. She cries out his name, desperately asking what he's doing. But Mikoto can only stare back, his own eyes filled with confusion. She asks if he's forgotten her face, calling out her own name, Azusa. She explains that she lost her glasses while running for her life. Tears of relief and sorrow stream down Mikoto's face. He pulls Azusa into a desperate hug, crying out her name. Elsewhere, the sound of someone fleeing echoes through the trees. The man in the camo jacket runs for his life, trying to escape the village. But his escape comes to an abrupt halt as he collides with an unseen figure. He falls to the ground, staring up in shock at the person who stopped him. A man in a white suit looks down, telling him not to waste the opportunity he was given. The story then flashes back to the girl from the first group, who tearfully insists this wasn't her fault. She remembers the happy selfie they took, a time before the nightmare began. And she recalls their plan to do a surprise livestream during their trip. The story flashes back to Ryoko, who sits with a younger Ohara, complaining about being beaten to the punch. She wonders if they could identify the people in the video based on their university. But Ohara scoffs, insisting his own information network would have already found them. She glares back, annoyed by his overconfidence. He then gets up to leave for a meeting, telling her to pay the bill. She slams the door in frustration, shouting his name as he leaves. But her attention is suddenly caught by a voice calling out to her. It's the mysterious man Hasuda, who offers to tell her the location she's looking for. Startled by his sudden appearance, she immediately tries to run away. He gives chase, trying to explain himself as she flees through the restaurant. She cries out as her escape is suddenly cut short. Hasuda calmly apologizes for his subordinate's aggressive pursuit. Ryoko can only stare back, her face flushed with confusion and fear. He then asks with a disarming smile if she has a moment to spare. A horrifying realization dawns on her. He lured them here to be bait for the monster. Tears stream down her face as she questions why this is happening to them. She runs through the rain, realizing she was nothing more than a pawn in their game. From the tree line, 3 silhouetted figures watch her desperate flight. Her mind fills with despair, feeling completely helpless and unable to fend for herself. A woman named Yuatori looks on, accepting the grim situation as unavoidable. Hasuda and his 2 strange associates give a silent, chilling command. The scene then cuts away, flashing back to the survivors. Ohara sits in agony, clutching the makeshift bandage over his ruined eye. He desperately reaches out to Mikoto, pleading to be taken to a hospital. Azusa and Mikoto can only look on, their faces etched with worry. She then asks what happened to Ryoko and Kazumi, the fate of their friends still unknown. Mikoto explains that something far more terrifying than the Napepo is lurking in the swamp. He recalls the Napepo tossing its victims into the murky water, using them as bait for whatever was lurking beneath the surface. It was a horrifying sight, like watching a school of piranhas devour their prey. Azusa realizes with dawning horror that Kazumi was likely taken to that same horrifying swamp. But Mikoto insists their priority has to be getting the injured Ohara to a hospital. Ohara cries out in agony, begging them not to abandon him in his current state. Azusa rushes to his side, offering a comforting hand as he desperately clings to her. Mikoto can only watch, the weight of their impossible situation pressing down on him. Her hand gently takes his, a small moment of reassurance in the overwhelming darkness. But their quiet moment is shattered as a man's head suddenly pops up from a hidden hatch in the floor. The entire group freezes, completely stunned by this unexpected arrival. The man looks back at them, his own face a mixture of relief and nervous sweat. He seems flustered, admitting that he was supposed to call them out one by one. Mikoto demands to know who this stranger is, his voice sharp with suspicion. The man stammers nervously, clearly intimidated by their hostile reception. He then blurts out that he was sent here specifically to find them. Mikoto and Azusa exchange a confused glance, questioning who could have possibly sent him. A sudden realization dawns on Mikoto as he mentions the name of his aunt, Ruriko. The man's eyes widen as he frantically confirms that's exactly right. He explains that Ruriko was the one who hired him to come and find them. Azusa realizes Mikoto must have told his aunt about their trip before they left. He asks if his aunt is with him, but the man quickly says she isn't here. He then explains that he drove to the village and has a car waiting nearby. Mikoto asks if his aunt is with him, as Ohara shouts in desperation about the car. He demands to be taken to the vehicle immediately, but the man just stammers nervously. The man admits that things have gone off script, but decides there's no other choice. He then leads the way down the stairs, telling them all to follow him. Ohara lets out a sigh of relief, muttering that they're finally going to be saved. But Mikoto suddenly stops, asking about the other member of Ohara's crew. Ohara just scoffs, callously telling them to leave Yukina behind. Mikoto can only stare back, completely stunned by his heartless command. He reminds them that she was the one who abandoned him in the first place. Mikoto argues back, questioning if she wasn't his girlfriend after all. Azusa can only mutter that Ohara is the absolute worst. But the man calmly explains that they've already secured the woman in question. He confirms that Yukina was the one who told them where to find the group. Azusa's face lights up with relief, asking where her friend is now. He gestures behind him, revealing the limbless monster waiting patiently, with Yukina's head now fused to its grotesque form. The story then flashes back to 1 hour earlier. Yukina's eyes are wide with disbelief and terror. She confronts Hasuda and his associates, demanding to know why they lured everyone here only to betray them. The woman in the white suit, Yuatori, just stares back with a cold, unfeeling gaze. As tears stream down Yukina's face, Yuatori simply tells her she doesn't need to understand. Hasuda gives a quiet order to his subordinate, leaving the matter in his hands. Yukina makes a break for it, screaming as she tries to escape their trap. But a hand clamps down on her head, stopping her in her tracks. The subordinate holds her fast as she struggles against his grip. Another man in glasses screams in frustration, telling him to wait. The subordinate forces her eyes open as a dark, viscous fluid begins to pour. Her head is consumed by the dark substance in a horrifying display. The man in glasses can only watch in horror, screaming at the gruesome sight. He furiously scolds the subordinate, saying the bait is now completely useless. He clutches his head in despair, realizing he'll have to answer to Hasuda for this failure. The story cuts back to the smoldering ruins of the house that was just destroyed. And amidst the wreckage, the mysterious Hasuda stands completely unfazed. He takes a slow, deliberate step through the charred debris. His expression is cold and unreadable as the rain pours down his face. His attention is fixed on the strange, lumpy mass that survived the explosion. He watches it with a strange sense of patience, his hands clasped behind his back. And as he watches, the grotesque lump begins to tremble and stir. He calmly tells the creature that it's almost time to act. The scene then cuts to the horrifying, tooth-lined maw of the limbless monster. And back in the present, the survivors can only stare in abject terror at the creature before them. Mikoto and Azusa try to drag the injured Ohara away from the approaching monster. But in the chaos, Ohara loses his footing and begins to fall. He crashes hard onto the forest floor, unable to get back up on his own. From the ground, he desperately pleads for them not to leave him behind. Mikoto looks back, shouting at him to get up and stop wasting time. His face twists in anger, screaming at the pathetic man to help himself. But their hesitation gives the monster the opening it needs. A slimy tendril shoots out, striking Ohara's leg with pinpoint accuracy. It wraps around his ankle as he screams for help, his fate now uncertain. Mikoto lunges forward, grabbing his hand in a desperate attempt to pull him free. But Mikoto refuses to let go, his face a mask of grim determination. Azusa cries out, completely helpless as she watches the struggle. The creature's pull is too strong, dragging both of them closer to its horrifying maw. Mikoto stares into the abyss of its tooth-lined mouth. And in that moment, a terrible choice becomes clear. He grabs the hammer, his only remaining weapons. And with a desperate cry, he brings it down directly on Ohara's ruined eye. The impact sends a spray across his face as he recoils from his own brutal act. Azusa screams, unable to comprehend what he's just done to the injured streamer. He then turns his fury on the monster, striking the severed head of Ohara now fused to its body. Mikoto lets out a horrified scream, his face splattered with the aftermath of his own brutal choice. The monster's eye retracts into its body like a grotesque snail. He stands over the fallen creature and the motionless body of Ohara, his mind completely shattered. The man in the suit Hasuda screams in horror, calling Mikoto's actions unbelievably cruel. He looms over the boy, declaring that what he did to his friend was completely inhuman. Ohara's face is a ruin, his eye completely gone from the brutal impact. Hasuda continues to shout, horrified that he would mangle his friend so terribly. A single tear of grief and shock rolls down Mikoto's cheek. Azusa suddenly grabs him from behind, desperately calling out his name. She screams at him, her voice filled with terror, pleading for him to run away with her now. Azusa pulls Mikoto with all her strength, screaming at him to run away with her. But a desperate hand suddenly grabs her from behind, stopping their escape. She looks back in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's Ohara, his ruined face pleading with them not to leave him behind. Azusa lets out a terrified scream, trapped by the injured man. He holds on tight, begging her to let him go with them. Tears stream down her face, her hope of escape now completely gone. The limbless monster then reveals its true horrifying form, a writhing mass of heads and tendrils. One of its grotesque appendages shoots forward with blinding speed. Azusa can only stare in abject terror as the attack closes in. The appendage strikes with brutal finality, sending Azusa's head flying into the air. Mikoto can only scream, watching in abject horror as his last friend is taken from him. Her head tumbles through the air, a silent testament to the creature's power. It lands on the ground with a sickening thud, her eyes wide and lifeless. Mikoto is left frozen, splattered with the gruesome evidence of her final moments. He kneels in the rain-soaked mud, completely alone with the remains of his friend. His mind finally shatters, haunted by the smiling faces of everyone he's lost. A painful memory flashes through his mind, a time when they were all still alive and happy. The weight of his grief becomes too much to bear, and he breaks down completely. But while Mikoto is lost in his despair, Ohara begins to crawl away, seeing a chance to escape. Ohara cries out in the rain, his vision gone and his mind reeling from the loss of his crew. He stumbles blindly through the woods, desperate to find the main road and escape. But the forest holds another horrifying secret, a woman's head held captive by writhing tendrils. Mikoto can only stare, his own eyes wide with a fresh wave of terror. The limbless monster reveals its latest grotesque creations, 2 more victims fused to its form. The girl in the cat shirt is frozen in place, her face a mask of pure shock. One of the heads stares blankly, a dark fluid dripping from its lifeless features. Its expression then twists into a silent, horrifying grimace. The grotesque hybrid lunges forward, striking Mikoto with brutal force. Its face contorts in a silent scream as it closes in on our horrified hero. Mikoto's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The girl in the cat shirt lets out a final, desperate scream. But his grief twists into a final, desperate act of rage. He tears into the creature's grotesque head with his bare hands. The monster's head is left a mangled ruin on the forest floor. He stands over the fallen creature, his body splattered with its remains. But his shock slowly begins to twist into something else entirely. A quiet, unsettling sound escapes his lips as he stares at the aftermath. And then he breaks, his grief replaced by wild, unhinged laughter. But the creature's body begins to stir, its grotesque form not yet defeated. His laughter echoes through the rain, a sound completely devoid of joy. But Hasuda's subordinate steps in, spraying something directly into his face. The wild laughter dies in his throat as the substance takes effect. He collapses to the ground, his body finally giving out. The man complains about how much trouble Mikoto has been, ordering Yuitori to carry him away. As Hasuda and the Napepo lead the way, he says they're taking the boy to their master's mansion. Back at the smoldering ruins of the house, the strange lumpy mass that survived the fire begins to stir. It suddenly cracks open with a blinding flash of light, and a strange energy ripples out across the entire forest. The story cuts to a sprawling, dilapidated mansion shrouded in the pouring rain. Raindrops patter against the ground, the only sound in this desolate place. Inside, Mikoto slowly begins to stir, his body aching from the ordeal. A figure in a white suit stands over him, his back turned to our hero. Mikoto looks up, weakly asking who is standing before him. A flicker of recognition crosses his face as he questions if it's the man named Hasuda. The figure slowly begins to turn, its face still hidden in shadow. But as it's revealed, it's not a face at all, but a void filled with countless floating eyes. A blood-curdling scream rips from Mikoto's throat at the impossible sight. He scrambles backward, his mind shattering at the sight of this new, unimaginable horror. He looks around the dilapidated room, his mind still reeling from the impossible sight. He weakly asks where he's been taken, his voice filled with confusion. He steps out onto a rain-soaked veranda, the storm matching his inner turmoil. Our boy surveys the desolate landscape that now surrounds him. But as he walks, his eyes catch a strange mask lying beneath the floorboards. A sudden noise makes him freeze, his attention drawn to the edge of the property. He sees Hasuda standing silently by the swamp, his back turned to our hero. From the murky water, a strange, slug-like creature begins to emerge. It rises from the depths, its form unlike anything he's seen before. And its face is horrifyingly human, revealing the twisted form of Yuitori. Her face is a ruin, twisted into a grotesque mockery of what it once was. And Mikoto can only scream, his mind shattering at the impossible sight. The narrative reveals that the tragedy unfolding in Alka village is not the first of its kind, as another victim is brutally taken. Another memory shows a desperate fight against an unseen horror. A gruesome injury from a past encounter flashes through the narrative. Because this horrifying cycle has happened here before. The story then cuts to a brochure for a camping tour in this very village. A woman with a confident, almost predatory smile looks on. And the story flashes back 44 years to where this all began. The story jumps back to May 1st, 1981, as another bus makes its way to Alka village for a mystery tour. Inside, a new group of young people are filled with excitement for their own adventure. One of them holds up the tour brochure, questioning the name of the creature they're supposed to find. Her friend reacts with surprise, asking if she really came without knowing the local legend. Another girl explains that the Napepo is said to be the origin of the faceless ghost. A young man with glasses elaborates, describing the creature as a shapeless lump of flesh, just like in the old drawings. The others are impressed by his knowledge, which he credits to his folklore studies. He then shares a story about a famous historical figure who supposedly encountered this very creature. He continues, explaining that this village has its own unique legend tied to the monster. A legend about a figure that acts as a chain, binding the Napepo to this very land. The story flashes back to a chaotic scene of villagers from long ago. In this very village, there once lived a man named Tokuhei. He was a serious man with no family who couldn't bear to watch his home fall into ruin, so he decided to break a forbidden taboo. Under the cover of darkness, he began his grim work. He gathered the bodies of 5 recently deceased people and began a ritual swapping their limbs to create new forms. Using the silk from dozens of different spider species, he stitched the mismatched parts together as an offering to the Red Swamp. This ritual was said to grant great fortune, but it was sealed away for the immense hatred it created, with 5 gray stones placed to contain the curse. Each stone acted as a seal, holding back the village's dark power. With a single strike, one of the 5 sacred stones is shattered. And so Tokuhei broke the ancient seals, performing the forbidden rite. From the swamp, a single, unblinking eye breaks the surface. A grotesque figure rises, its body a patchwork of mismatched limbs. Its face is a mask of silent agony, the stitches still fresh on its skin. With a sickening contortion, its head snaps back at an impossible angle. The creature then turns on its creator, its rage finally unleashed. The story then shifts to a lone house in the village, some time later. 2 servants announce that breakfast is ready for their master. But Tokuhei looks back in alarm, ordering them to stay away. His skin is cracked and peeling as he screams for them to get away from him. The servants can only watch from the doorway, their faces pale with fear. They whisper to each other that their master has lost his mind, calling the situation horrifying. But a strange, cracked hand suddenly reaches out for one of the men. It's Tokuhei who grabs the terrified servant from behind with unnatural strength. He begins to drag the struggling man away, ignoring his desperate pleas to stop. The other servant can only watch in horror as strange, writhing things appear around her. In the swamp, disembodied eyes begin to float to the surface of the dark water. The first servant falls backward into the murky depths, screaming in terror. And Tokuhei stands over him, his own eyes now glowing with a dark, inhuman light. The remaining servant steps outside, her expression filled with concern. She calls out to the other man, who has returned looking dazed and unwell. But her relief quickly turns to terror as she sees his true state. He's covered in strange marks, his eyes wide and unfocused. Tokuhei then began bringing more strange, unsettling figures back to the house. Their faces are blank and featureless, like dark, empty masks. The servant girl can only watch from the shadows, her mind reeling in fear. And so, the legend of Alka village continued to grow darker. A mysterious, smiling figure arrives, finding the village to his liking. With his arrival, the village began to prosper, its population growing once more. A new master arrived, a man named Dana, who walked through the village with an air of authority. The villagers celebrated their good fortune, with one man's son even building a new house for his bride. But this prosperity came at a terrible price, as the man's body erupted in a grotesque display. The villagers, however, remained oblivious, thanking Tokuhei for their newfound wealth. They could hardly believe how much their lives had improved in such a short time. But a young boy tried to warn them, screaming that they didn't know the true nature of their new master. Because one day the man's sanity snapped, and he began destroying the sacred altars. He even desecrated the Jizo statues, scattering their heads across the ground. A voice then called out into the darkness, a name echoing through the trees. And from the earth itself, a figure clawed its way to the surface, reborn from the curse. The creature's head is a mask of silent, unending agony. Its grotesque body is then dragged through the undergrowth and tossed into the murky swamp as an offering. Tokuhei stands alone, his silhouette a grim omen against the pouring rain. But the curse has already taken root, a dark fluid weeping from his eyes. The villagers can only watch from a distance, their forms shrouded in shadow. They whisper amongst themselves, unable to believe what has become of the man they once knew. One of the servants realizes with dawning horror that this is no longer their master. The corrupted Tokuhei then turns on his own people, his humanity completely gone. The others can only conclude that their master was consumed by the very monster he summoned. And so Tokuhei became known as the Great Evil, his body a twisted ruin. As the village prospered, his shadowy followers multiplied, and no one dared to oppose him. But the curse continued its work, his flesh slowly beginning to rot away. His body was a canvas of decay, a testament to the dark power he'd unleashed. Yet he continued to live on, rotting away for over a century in a state of constant agony. The servant girl, now an old woman, could only watch her former master's slow decay. She finally bids him farewell, thanking him for the long years of service. He can only let out a guttural, inhuman cry in response. She offers a final, quiet wish for him to be well, her expression filled with pity. And the legend of the faceless ghost was born from his unending, silent scream. His body was left a twisted ruin, a silent scream frozen on his face for all eternity. The servant could only stare in abject horror at what her master had become. Overwhelmed by the sight, she turned and fled from the cursed house. And so Tokuhei's body became a grotesque, bloated mockery of a man. His form was now the very image of the yokai from the ancient legends, the Napepo. The young man on the bus finishes his tale, explaining this is the legend of Alka village. He adds that after Tokuhei's time, the village prospered for a while under a new leader. But the girls just laugh, finding the idea of a headless ghost still haunting the place absurd. The rest of the group, however, listens with a new, unsettling seriousness. And just as the dark legend concludes, their driver announces that they've arrived. The group steps off the bus, finding themselves in the same desolate village. They look around, unimpressed by the seemingly empty landscape. But a voice suddenly calls out, drawing the attention of the entire group. A woman with a chilling smile welcomes them to their final destination. A newspaper article from the time confirms the grim outcome. The entire tour group vanished without a trace. And with that dark history revealed, the story returns to the present day. Back at the rain-soaked mansion, the storm continues to rage on. Raindrops fall upon the surface of the cursed swamp, a place that has already consumed so many lives. And Makoto can only stare out, his face a portrait of absolute soul-crushing despair. A woman with long blonde hair looks on, her expression unreadable. He finds himself facing a faceless figure standing by the cursed swamp. The full moon hangs in the sky, a silent witness to the unfolding mystery. But as he looks again, her features are suddenly clear and distinct. He realizes with a jolt that this must be the infamous Hasuda. But he's left completely baffled, unable to even tell their age or gender. Hasuda simply stares back, their expression cold and unwavering. Mikoto's fear turns to anger as he accuses them of being the mastermind behind it all. He collapses, demanding to know what these creatures are and what role Hasuda plays in this nightmare. But Hasuda only looks down, their gaze filled with a quiet, unsettling pity. Hasuda explains that humans perceive something as a person as long as it has a head. Mikoto can only stare back, completely baffled by their cryptic words. With a simple command to follow, Hasuda turns and leads him deeper into the woods. The scene then cuts away, focusing on a single mosquito in the darkness. It lands silently on an unseen person's arm, ready to strike. A hand comes down with a swift, decisive slap. We find Ohara alone and miserable, his body covered in itchy bites. He pants in exhaustion, completely disoriented and unsure of where he is. He looks at his hands in the darkness, wondering if his ruined eye can ever be healed. With his vision gone, he can only stumble blindly through the dense forest. He clutches his head, stumbling through the oppressive darkness of the woods. The narrative explains that when sight is lost, the other senses become painfully sharp. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig now echoes in his mind. He calls out desperately, terrified of being left alone in this nightmare. A sudden sound cuts through the air as a bat takes flight. Ohara flinches violently, startled by the sudden noise so close to his head. In his blind panic, he loses his footing and tumbles forward. His boot lands on something soft and unsettling on the forest floor. He crashes to the ground, his body hitting the dirt with a painful thud. His face is a mask of agony, the pain of his fall compounding his terror. He lies motionless on the forest floor, his makeshift bandage doing little to hide his agony. Nearby, the gruesome evidence of his injury lies discarded in the dirt. A dark, silhouetted figure suddenly looms over his helpless form. A hand reaches down, grabbing him firmly by the ankle. He's then dragged unceremoniously through the undergrowth. The mysterious figure pulls him deeper into the oppressive darkness of the woods. Their destination is the cursed swamp, a place that has already claimed so many. Ohara begins to stir, his ragged breaths cutting through the silence. He lets out a pained groan, still completely at the mercy of his captor. The figure continues its grim work, pulling him toward the murky water's edge. He's then tossed unceremoniously into the murky water. A terrified scream rips from his throat as he plunges into the depths. He breaks the surface, completely disoriented and questioning where he is. But a dawning horror crosses his face as he recognizes the cursed swamp. Before he can react, something grabs him from below. He's violently pulled back under the surface of the dark water. He thrashes wildly, screaming in pure, unadulterated terror. Because beneath the surface, a horrifying, tooth-lined maw opens wide. It lunges forward, its countless teeth closing in on him. Ohara lets out one final, desperate scream as he's consumed by the unseen horror. Ohara lets out one final scream, trying to fight back against the inevitable. But his body is pulled apart, his final moments a silent, horrifying display. From the shore, the mysterious figure watches the streamer's life come to a grim end. A cold, unsettling smile spreads across their face. And with a final splash, Ohara is gone, consumed by the cursed swamp. The moon hangs high in the sky, a silent witness to the carnage. Mikoto now stands alone with the enigmatic Hasuda. His face is a mixture of terror, grief, and a burning desire for answers. He tightens his grip on the hammer, the only weapon he has left. And with a scream of pure rage, he lunges forward to attack. But his desperate attack meets only a cold, unfeeling stare. Hasuda simply turns their back on him, completely unfazed by the boy's rage. They run a hand through their hair, a gesture of annoyance rather than fear. Mikoto's fury gives way to stunned silence, his attack rendered meaningless. Hasuda looks back, calmly telling him to follow them this way. With no other choice, Mikoto trails behind the enigmatic figure. They lead him to the edge of the very swamp that has consumed all his friends. A quiet command from Hasuda urges him to hurry along. The story then cuts away to two of Hasuda's strange subordinates, who speak of not keeping their master waiting. And we're shown the smoldering ruins of the house, a grim reminder that this nightmare is far from over. Amidst the smoldering ruins, the strange, lumpy mass remains untouched. Hasuda leads Mikoto forward, explaining the true purpose of this nightmare. They admit their methods have been convoluted and indirect, all to slowly widen a pinhole in the powerful barrier surrounding this village. Mikoto listens in horror, finally understanding the scale of their twisted plan. As if responding to their words, the strange mass from the fire begins to stir. His eyes widen as the horrifying truth of the situation finally dawns on him. Hasuda then turns, making a chilling request for his full cooperation. But before Mikoto can even process the demand, a sudden crack echoes through the... One of Hasuda's subordinates sends our boy flying with a swift, brutal kick. The man in glasses looks on, annoyed by this whole ordeal. The story then flashes back, showing him chasing after a young woman in a patterned shirt. But she's not just running, her face is a mask of pure defiance. She quickly scoops up a rock from the path and hurls it directly into his face, making him cry out in pain. He stumbles back, his nose bleeding and his glasses now broken. The woman looks back with a smirk, taunting him about his ruined glasses. Yuatori can only stare in disbelief, stunned that a normal human is putting up such a fight. The man in glasses furiously orders his other subordinate to capture her at once. The brutish man lunges forward, ready to overpower the defiant woman. Yuatori realizes with shock that this woman is no ordinary human. The woman makes a break for it, sprinting through the dense woods. She disappears into the oppressive darkness of the forest. The two subordinates give chase, leaping through the undergrowth. But the man in glasses loses his footing and tumbles to the ground. His partner scolds him for his clumsiness, telling him to get up. Yuatori watches the scene unfold with a cold, unimpressed expression. Meanwhile, the woman continues her desperate flight, pushing herself to the limit. She gasps for air, her body screaming in protest, before finally collapsing, admitting she can't run another step. But a sudden voice makes him look up in surprise. The woman who escaped Hasuda's men stands before him, asking if he's okay. She calls out to him, her face a mix of exhaustion and relief. He stares back, equally stunned to find another survivor. She asks in disbelief if he really managed to make it out alive. He explains that he's been wandering the woods alone ever since they were separated. Overwhelmed by the reunion, she collapses into his arms. He looks down, still processing the moment, glad that she's safe. She cries with relief, admitting she thought everyone else was gone. But his nervous expression hints that this reunion is not what it seems. But his hands suddenly close around her head, his grip firm and unsettling. She asks him if he's seen Ohara, her voice filled with concern. She worries that with his injury, he might have collapsed somewhere in the woods. The man in the camo jacket just looks away, claiming he hasn't seen him. Her face falls, the hope of finding their leader quickly fading. She then turns, insisting they have to escape and find the person responsible for luring them. He just stares back, his expression unreadable under the shadow of his glasses. But his hand suddenly shoots out, grabbing her with a surprising quickness. She lets out a startled cry as he violently pulls her off balance. He shoves her to the ground, her desperate question echoing through the trees. He rips her shirt open, his betrayal now brutally clear. She's left completely helpless on the forest floor. She asks if Ohara is really gone, her voice filled with disbelief. Irie then admits with a chilling smile that he's the one who did it. He boasts about throwing Ohara into the swamp, enjoying the man's final, desperate pleas. His face twists into a mask of pure, unhinged glee. She can only stare back, questioning if he's completely lost his mind. Her shock quickly turns into a cold, simmering rage. He looms over her, his betrayal now absolute. But her gaze falls upon something just within her reach. His face contorts into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. The girl cries out as she's violently overpowered. He holds her down, his intentions now horrifyingly clear. But she screams back with a mix of terror and defiance, refusing to be a victim. His assault is suddenly interrupted as his eyes catch something strange hanging from a branch. A bizarre, translucent pod drips a strange fluid onto the forest floor. It suddenly detaches, falling directly onto his shoulder with a wet slap. He cries out in pain and surprise as the girl looks on with a triumphant smirk. A closer look reveals a horrifying, tooth-lined maw opening on the small creature. And his face twists in agony as the tiny monster sinks its teeth into his flesh. Irie the mercenary screams in pain and rage, trying to shake off the creature. He stomps his boot down, trying to crush the small, parasitic monster. Irie curses the creature, furiously trying to dislodge it from his leg. The woman in the patterned shirt watches, her face a mask of shock and fear. Irie stumbles back, clutching his injured leg, still reeling from the attack. He looks down at the ground, where more of the strange, slug-like creatures are emerging. He brings his boot down again, desperately trying to crush the multiplying parasites. Irie screams in disgust, ordering the creatures to stay away from him. The woman in the patterned shirt recoils, terrified by the grotesque sight. A close-up reveals the horrifying, tooth-lined maw of one of the slug-like creatures. The woman in the patterned shirt stares in disbelief, wondering what these larvae-like things are. But a voice cuts through the chaos, revealing that it takes 40 years to raise them to this point. It's Hasuda who stands with a cold, unwavering authority over the scene. Irie and the woman can only stare, completely stunned by this new arrival. Hasuda explains that it takes 20 years for the particles to gather into a small mass, and another 20 years of feeding on human flesh for them to grow to their current size. And from the woods, a massive, grotesque creature emerges, the horrifying result of their long work. Irie's face twists into a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He immediately prostrates himself, begging Hasuda for forgiveness and swearing he never meant to betray them. Hasuda just looks down, their expression completely unmoved by his desperate pleas. The woman in the patterned shirt can only stare, stunned by his sudden groveling. Irie proudly announces that he's captured the woman, asking if his loyalty is now proven. He offers to bring them more sacrifices, desperate to prove he can still be useful to Hasuda. The woman looks on, her face a mask of pure, horrified disbelief. Hasuda calmly acknowledges that Iri did, in fact, help them capture their target. But with a chilling smile, they declare that his head is no longer of any use to them. The brutish subordinate suddenly looms up from behind the terrified mercenary. Iri's eyes widen in a final, silent scream of pure terror. The subordinate's hand moves in a swift, brutal blur of motion. Iri reaches out a desperate hand, begging Hasuda for forgiveness one last time. Yuatori gives a cold smile, telling the subordinate he can do as he pleases with their captive. The woman in the patterned shirt can only plead for help, her defiance now gone. The man in glasses looks on with a wide, unsettling stare, calling her fortunate. He then declares that her head has been chosen for a greater purpose. It's an honor, he explains, to have caught the eye of their master, Hasuda. The woman lets out a final, desperate scream of defiance. The brutish subordinate lunges forward, his face a mask of cruel satisfaction. He holds her down, her struggles finally beginning to cease. Her hands fall limp, her fight seemingly at an end. But her fingers close around a sharp rock, a final silent act of rebellion. With a final surge of defiance, she drives the rock directly into the subordinate's face. His head snaps back, his expression frozen in a silent scream of agony. He collapses to the ground, completely stunned by the unexpected counterattack. The man in glasses and the woman can only stare, shocked by her ferocity. But his shock quickly turns to rage as he lunges for her again. The man in glasses calls out to Yuatori, who is now writhing on the ground in pain. He looks on through his shattered lenses, completely bewildered by the sudden turn of events. His gaze then falls upon a set of broken stones nearby. And a horrifying realization dawns on him: these are the ancient sealing stones. Just then a monstrous hand grabs Yuatori, dragging her down with a final, desperate scream. Yuatori is dragged down, her body twisting as she lets out a final, desperate scream. The narrative flashes back, revealing that the great evil Tokuhei broke the 5 sealing stones long ago, but their power still lingered. The man in glasses realizes with dawning horror what those stones truly were. Hasuda looks on with cold regret, admitting they should have removed them sooner. The subordinate can only stammer out an apology, terrified of the consequences of his failure. On the ground, Yuatori's body lies still, her fight finally over. And from the broken seal, a new, even more grotesque creature rises to take her place. The story cuts to another time, another group, as a young man freezes in abject terror. The horrifying new monster lunges forward, its claws extended toward another victim. Its hand closes around his arm with unstoppable, brutal force. The new creature sinks its teeth into the camo-clad man, its attack swift and brutal. The woman in the patterned shirt can only watch, her face a mask of pure shock. Another bizarre creature appears, this one with the head of a horse, its form twisted and unnatural. The man's body is then pulled apart by the smaller, parasitic creatures. His head is sent flying through the air, landing on the ground with a sickening finality. The woman looks on, her shock hardening into a cold resolve. But the ordeal has taken its toll, and she collapses to the ground, exhausted. The man in glasses realizes the creature is now completely out of control, empowered by the broken stone. He laments that only a human could have touched the stone, wishing he'd removed it sooner. Hasuda gives a calm order to bring the woman along, which the subordinate nervously accepts. He carries her unconscious form away, leaving the grim aftermath of the battle behind. The new monster stands victorious, holding the remains of its victim as a trophy. The full moon hangs in the sky, a silent witness to the night's horrors. A woman with blonde hair looks on, remarking that the timing is just right. Back at the smoldering ruins, the strange lumpy mass begins to glow with an eerie light. The story then cuts to a serene temple, a stark contrast to the chaos in the woods. Inside, a voice warns that the cursed village is no place for living humans. But a woman in a white suit insists that she can't simply let the matter go. An older man sits with a cat, his expression weary as he listens to her resolve. The woman explains she's investigated the village herself, but found no recent information. The old man recalls the last known event was a mystery tour 40 years prior, a trip based on a silly Napepo legend. She presses him, asking what exactly happened during that ill-fated tour. The old man's expression turns grim as he considers her question. He then explains that the land itself is not meant for human habitation. The reason for this, he explains, lies at the very heart of the village. A cursed swamp that holds a dark secret. He continues, saying the village has no river, only a swamp with no official name, known only as the Red Swamp. It's a place he calls a door to the demon world, a place forbidden to ordinary people. And for centuries, its power was sealed away by virtuous monks using 5 sacred stones. She asks if he's referring to the great evil Tokyuhei, the one who broke the sacred stones. The old man smiles, impressed that she's so well informed on the local history. She admits she thought it was just a fairy tale, questioning if any of it is actually real. He explains that after the stones were broken, the village prospered through its dark power. But the villagers were corrupted, losing their names and faces, eventually becoming slaves to the curse. His expression turns grim as he reveals the name passed down through generations for this entity. Her eyes widen in shock as she hears the name, Kubanashi the Headless. The scene then shifts to a group of cats lounging on a stone path. The woman comments on the large number of cats, and the old man explains it's simply because he likes them. He smiles, adding that the locals call this place the Cat Temple, even though it's not a real temple at all. The old man then asks who it was that suggested she come to this place. She explains it was a person by the name of Takatora Randa. The old man sighs, recognizing the name and the trouble that always seems to follow. He asks if she's truly determined to go to the village, and she confirms without hesitation. She reveals that her niece went to Alka village and has been completely out of contact. Her brother, the girl's father, was in an accident, and she's been unable to reach her to deliver the news. The old man asks if she plans to leave tonight, and she admits her heart is pounding with unease. He looks on with a grim, contemplative expression, weighing her words. He then tells her to wait just a moment, holding up a small black cat. The woman watches in confusion as he places the small animal on the ground before her. The old man returns, now dressed for a journey and carrying a bag. He tells the woman he's coming with her, and she looks back in complete surprise. He explains that the animals have been restless, and he can't let her go into that danger alone. With a quiet look of understanding, she accepts his help. And so their car drives off into the mountains, watched by the temple cats. The story then cuts to the dead of night, under the light of a full moon. Back at the smoldering ruins, the strange lumpy mass begins to glow with an ominous energy. Nearby, the woman in the patterned shirt slowly begins to regain consciousness. She sits up with a gasp, finding herself bound and alone amidst the wreckage. Her eyes widen in dawning horror as she realizes she's been taken captive. She realizes with dawning horror that there is no escape. The man in glasses reports to Hasuda, telling them everything is ready. Hasuda looks on with a cold, unwavering expression. Their face then splits apart, revealing a void of countless floating eyes. The woman in the patterned shirt can only stare in abject terror. Her gaze is drawn to the strange, lumpy mass from the fire. It sits under a net, a silent, ominous presence in the ruins. But a hand suddenly pushes through the netting from within. Her eyes widen in pure, unadulterated shock at the impossible sight. The story then cuts to the aunt, wondering why her niece would ever visit such a desolate place. She explains that her niece was an avid hiker and went to the village with her university friends. The old man asks if this was part of a promotional campaign for an abandoned village campsite. The aunt admits her niece didn't know the details, only that someone in her group brought up the idea. He considers this, realizing with dawning dread that it must be the work of the same people. As they drive, he comments that she doesn't seem like a typical college student, mentioning her family situation. Their car finally pulls up to the entrance of the desolate, unwelcoming forest. The two of them step out, the aunt shining a flashlight into the oppressive darkness. The old man looks around, a bead of sweat on his brow as he notes the unnatural silence. He explains that there are no sounds of birds, insects, or any living creatures at all. A sudden chill runs down his spine as he feels the air change, urging her to turn back now. But the aunt just stares into the darkness, her expression filled with a quiet dread. The old man cries out, trying to stop her as she suddenly bolts into the woods. He screams for her to stay away from the swamp, but she ignores his desperate warning. She calls out Mikoto's name, her voice echoing through the silent, oppressive trees. But the old man quickly grabs her, desperately trying to keep her quiet. Because just ahead, a dark, monstrous silhouette emerges from the undergrowth. A new, horrifying creature reveals itself, its skeletal form a true nightmare made real. The two of them can only stare, their faces frozen in abject terror. Its eyes are a milky white, its mouth open in a silent, predatory scream. The creature lunges forward as the old man pulls her back, just out of its reach. The old man confirms her worst fears, identifying the creature as the legendary Kubanashi. She can barely process the name, her mind reeling from the impossible sight. He grabs her arm, screaming for them to get back to the car immediately. Their only hope for escape sits just a few yards away. They scramble inside, slamming the doors shut behind them. But a dark, monkey-like silhouette suddenly appears on their windshield. And with a sickening crunch, the entire front of the car is completely destroyed. The skeletal monster roars, its attack swift and brutal. Its hand shoots through the shattered glass, grabbing the old man by the face. The ant can only scream his name, watching in horror as he's pulled away. The skeletal monster lunges forward, its maw wide open in a silent scream. But the old man's eyes narrow with a sudden, fierce determination. He shoves his entire arm down the creature's throat, stopping its attack. He invokes the name of ancient gods, ordering the creature to be gone. The monster's face begins to twist and contort in agony. Its entire body is thrown backward as the ant watches in terror. Both of them can only stare, their faces pale with shock. The creature's head stretches grotesquely, its form beginning to unravel. Its neck twists into an impossible shape as it dissolves into a dark fluid. And with a final shudder, it melts away into a pile of grotesque remains. The two survivors can only stare at the grotesque remains of the monster they just defeated. The ant looks on in disbelief, questioning what that creature could have possibly been. The old man explains that he found a fragment of the ancient sealing stone on a previous visit. He believes its lingering power is what allowed them to vanquish the beast. But she's left confused, wondering why a creature with a head would be called the headless. Back at the ruins, the captive woman stares in horror at the strange mass under the net. A hand suddenly pushes through the netting, revealing something is alive inside. Her eyes widen in pure, unadulterated shock at the impossible sight. A headless female form emerges, a grotesque creation stolen from a living human.